While much of the world watches military buildups overseas, there's a battle being fought closer to home, one that often goes unnoticed, but it strikes at the heart of what it means to support the men and women in uniform. In the rolling hills of Missouri, at Fort Leonard Wood, families of soldiers live every day with crumbling walls, leaky roofs, and bathrooms overrun with mold. It sounds almost unbelievable, but this is reality, not fiction. This is the story of a United States senator stepping up, refusing to let bureaucracy and broken promises define the lives of those who serve. His name is Josh Hawley, and his fight is both personal and principled. Hawley didn't hear about these conditions in a briefing or a memo. He saw them. He walked through the homes himself, met the families, spoke to spouses, listened to children who had no safe place to play, no place to feel truly at home. And what he saw shocked him. Not just the decay, but the indifference, the repeated promises from Army leadership that went unfulfilled. The same promises, year after year, that never resulted in a single tangible improvement. For Hawley, this wasn't just a matter of frustration, it was a call to action. He understood immediately that the quality of life of service members is directly tied to recruitment, retention, morale, and ultimately, military readiness. When he took the floor of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Hawley didn't mince words. He addressed the Army leadership with precision, holding them accountable for a failure that had persisted for years. He asked the questions that everyone at home, watching their loved ones serve, was screaming. How can we expect to recruit the best and brightest into the armed forces when their families are forced to live in homes with mold, holes in the walls, and inadequate childcare facilities? How can we talk about defending our nation when we can't even protect our soldiers from substandard living conditions? His words were sharp, his tone unmistakable. He was frustrated, and he made no effort to hide it. Army leadership responded with what they have long delivered in similar situations: reassurances, vague commitments, and promises of a comprehensive package to address housing and quality of life. But Hawley was having none of it. A package? That's not what the families at Fort Leonard would need. They don't need a committee studying the problem, a report summarizing it, or another timeline with no follow-through. They need walls that don't leak, kitchens they can cook in without worry, bathrooms that are safe, and a place where their children can grow up in security. Hawley called out the Pentagon's pattern of empty pledges, pointing out that last year, promised funding never materialized. $0 were spent. And that, to him, was unacceptable. Hawley's strategy was both simple and powerful. Show the conditions, highlight the promises that went unfulfilled, and demand accountability. He shared personal anecdotes from his tours of the homes, detailing the conversations he had with families, the visible decay he witnessed, and the frustration etched on the faces of those living in unacceptable conditions. He reminded the committee that these aren't abstract issues. They're real lives being affected every day by neglect. By grounding his argument in first-hand experience, Hawley transformed what could have been a dry policy discussion into a vivid, compelling narrative. But Hawley's focus wasn't just on raising awareness, it was on driving tangible results. He made it clear that he intended to be persistent, to continue pushing until concrete action was taken. He promised the service members at Fort Leonard Wood that he would be a royal pain until meaningful change occurred. This was not hyperbole. It was a reflection of his long-term commitment. And he backed it up with legislative action. In 2025, he introduced a bill to fund the replacement of 1,142 aging homes at the base, with a projected investment of $700 million. This wasn't a temporary fix or a token gesture. It was a full-scale effort to restore dignity and stability to the lives of soldiers and their families. The impact of Hawley's advocacy goes beyond the walls of Fort Leonard Wood. It sends a message across all military installations. The lives of service members matter, and those in positions of authority will be held accountable when they fail to meet their obligations. By confronting the bureaucracy head-on, Hawley challenges the systemic neglect that allows substandard conditions to persist. He demonstrates that leadership isn't just about rank or protocol, it's about action, presence, and unwavering commitment to those you serve. At its core, Hawley's fight highlights a broader truth about military readiness. It's not just about equipment, weapons, or training exercises. True readiness encompasses the entire ecosystem supporting a soldier: safe housing, quality childcare, accessible healthcare, and the assurance that their service is valued. Neglect any of these elements, and you erode morale, hinder recruitment, and compromise effectiveness. Hawley's questioning reminds the Pentagon that readiness isn't only measured by the number of tanks or jets. It's measured by the confidence and well-being of the people who operate them. The Senate hearings revealed the stark contrast between political accountability and military bureaucracy. Hawley's questions were direct, unsparing, and persistent. He refused to accept generalized assurances or promises for the record. Instead, he demanded evidence of progress and transparency regarding the allocation of funds. He emphasized that previous commitments had resulted in nothing and insisted that the committee receive a timeline of concrete actions. His approach underscores a critical principle: accountability is not optional, it is a requirement, especially when the well-being of American soldiers is at stake. In telling this story, it's impossible to ignore the human element. Behind every statistic, memo, or budget line, there are lives disrupted. Children who can't safely play in their backyards, spouses forced to manage unsafe conditions while supporting their service member, soldiers who return from duty to homes that fail to meet basic standards. Hawley's advocacy centers these human experiences, ensuring that policy discussions remain grounded in reality. This approach resonates deeply with the public, particularly those who may never visit Fort Leonard Wood, but understand that the integrity of our military depends on the support provided to those who serve. As the chapter unfolds, one realizes that Hawley's fight is emblematic of a larger struggle in government, balancing bureaucracy with accountability, promises with action, and policy with human impact. By holding the Army accountable, he challenges the system to do better. He models the kind of leadership that refuses to accept mediocrity or inaction. His relentless pursuit of justice for service members demonstrates that meaningful change is possible when elected officials are willing to confront entrenched institutions head-on. And yet, while the focus on housing is vital, it is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. As Hawley concluded the hearing, it became clear that the issues at Fort Leonard Wood are symptomatic of broader challenges facing the military: misplaced priorities, cultural distractions, and a tendency to focus on less critical initiatives while urgent problems persist. His work in Missouri sets the stage for the next battle, a confrontation over military policy, culture, and the surprising ways in which bureaucracy can distract from mission readiness. It is this next chapter, one that examines the debate over pronouns and military focus, where Hawley's commitment to clarity, accountability, and the real-world needs of service members will once again come to the fore. The story of Fort Leonard Wood ends this chapter not with resolution, but with determination. The homes still need rebuilding, the funding still needs to be allocated, and the families still await action. Hawley's efforts illuminate the importance of persistence, the power of direct accountability, and the impact a single committed leader can have on the lives of thousands. And as we turn to the next chapter, it is with the understanding that the fight for our military's integrity is far from over, and that the same courage and clarity that drove him to Missouri will be necessary as he confronts new challenges in unexpected places. As the world watches China expand its naval fleets, launch satellites, and develop hypersonic missiles, the United States military is supposed to be laser-focused on readiness, strategy, and defense. Yet in late 2022, an internal email from Andersen Air Force Base in Guam made headlines for a completely different reason, one that left many Americans scratching their heads and even laughing at the absurdity. The email instructed base leaders to avoid using words like he, she, male, female, youngest, and oldest in official communications. The rationale? To improve fairness and, astonishingly, lethality. This was not a joke. This was a real internal memo that reportedly circulated among senior leaders, sparking outrage, ridicule, and a flood of media attention. It quickly became the focus of Senator Josh Hawley's scrutiny in a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing. Hawley, known for cutting through bureaucratic nonsense, wasn't about to let this go unchallenged. He asked the question everyone wanted to hear the answer to: How does banning pronouns improve our military effectiveness? How does removing he or she help a service member face a real-world threat in Asia, Europe, or anywhere else? At first, the Air Force attempted to downplay the controversy. Lieutenant General A.C. Miller explained that the guidance was never official policy. It was a local initiative, perhaps even originating from a single commander or a social media post. The intention, she explained, was to standardize award write-ups and evaluations in a way that removed identifiers such as gender, age, and race, ensuring fair consideration for all personnel. Essentially, it was supposed to be a blind review system. But the memo's wording and its public exposure turned it into a lightning rod. The language sounded arbitrary, and the claim that it would improve lethality sounded ludicrous, even to Pentagon insiders. Hawley didn't let the bureaucratic hand-waving stand. He pressed Lieutenant General Miller repeatedly, seeking clarity. Was this policy? Was it enforceable? Had leaders actually been instructed to omit basic descriptors in a way that interfered with operational communications? The answers were clear. It was not policy, it was not official, and it certainly was not meant to interfere with training or combat operations. Yet Hawley's questioning illuminated something deeper: the mindset within parts of the military bureaucracy that allows such initiatives to emerge in the first place. To understand why this is significant, consider the broader context. While one base debates the proper use of pronouns, adversaries are actively building capabilities that threaten U.S. national security. China, Russia, and other potential competitors are not concerned with HR-style communications. They are developing technology, strategy, and lethal systems that could reshape global power dynamics. In contrast, American service members at Anderson AFB are being caught up in debates about language, while the true metrics of readiness, training, equipment, and operational focus risk being overshadowed. Hawley's frustration was palpable and justified. He asked the question that cut through all the noise: how does avoiding he or she make our troops more lethal? The simple logic resonated with the public. Enemies don't care about our vocabulary. What matters is mission focus, strategy, training, and resources. Hawley's blunt inquiry became a viral talking point because it highlighted the absurdity of misplaced priorities. While China builds hypersonic missiles, the Pentagon, at least in some corners, was debating grammar. But there's more to the story than just humor or outrage. The controversy touches on critical issues of military culture and policy. On the one hand, the Air Force's attempt at blind evaluations is a genuine effort to prevent bias, ensure fair recognition, and maintain equity among service members. On the other hand, the implementation was tone-deaf, poorly communicated, and seemed to prioritize bureaucracy over mission. Hawley's questioning forced the discussion into the public domain, making it clear that cultural initiatives cannot come at the expense of operational effectiveness. Hawley also drew attention to the broader theme of accountability. Leadership in the military is supposed to be grounded in discipline, clarity, and mission readiness. When local commanders introduce policies that appear disconnected from operational priorities, it raises questions about judgment, oversight, and the focus of those in charge. Hawley's line of questioning wasn't an attack on diversity or equity initiatives. It was a call for balance. How do we integrate these initiatives without undermining the primary mission of the military, which is to prepare for and, if necessary, win wars? Media coverage of the Anderson memo exploded, with headlines emphasizing the absurdity of banning pronouns to improve lethality. Conservative outlets, in particular, hailed Hawley for his direct approach, portraying him as the lone voice defending common sense against bureaucratic overreach. Analysts pointed out the irony. While senior officers debated vocabulary, rival nations tested their missiles and satellites, gaining strategic advantages. Hawley's questioning forced a national conversation about the dangers of prioritizing symbolic gestures over substantive military readiness. Beyond the media spectacle, Hawley's approach demonstrated a critical leadership principle. Confrontation with bureaucracy requires courage, preparation, and persistence. He did not allow vague explanations or official spin to dominate the narrative. He pressed for real answers, highlighted contradictions, and held leaders accountable in a public forum. This approach is instructive not only for policymakers, but also for citizens observing how elected officials can safeguard the interests of service members. In examining this episode, it's essential to recognize the dual layers at play. There is the surface controversy, banning pronouns, miscommunication, and public reaction. Then there is the deeper issue, how military bureaucracy manages priorities, allocates attention, and implements policies. Hawley's questioning brings both layers into sharp relief. The surface layer is almost comical in its absurdity, yet it serves as a gateway to a serious discussion about institutional focus, leadership, and the alignment of cultural initiatives with core missions. The lesson is clear. When bureaucracies lose sight of what truly matters, they risk not only inefficiency, but also credibility. Soldiers, families, and the public need assurance that military leadership is committed to defending the nation effectively, not creating distractions with questionable policies. Hawley's incisive questioning cut through the noise, illustrating that even well-intentioned initiatives must be scrutinized for impact, implementation, and consequences. As this chapter unfolds, the pronoun debate becomes more than a viral headline. It becomes a case study in leadership, priorities, and accountability. Hawley's focus on the absurdity of the memo, paired with his insistence on clarity and mission alignment, underscores a broader message. Cultural initiatives are important, but they must never compromise readiness, focus, or the fundamental duties of those entrusted with national defense. By the end of the hearing, the contrast was stark. Hawley stood for clarity, practicality, and accountability, while the bureaucracy struggled to justify its priorities in the face of scrutiny. His questions resonated because they reflected the common sense of everyday Americans. Why complicate the mission with distractions when real threats loom on the horizon? The applause he received from colleagues and observers alike was not just for theatrical effect. It was recognition of someone cutting through layers of complexity to defend common sense and the interests of those who serve. This chapter does not end with resolution. The Anderson memo controversy remains a cautionary tale of how misaligned priorities can create confusion, erode trust, and distract from the primary objectives of national defense. Hawley's intervention, however, sets a standard for engagement, vigilance, preparation, and the courage to hold leaders accountable. It demonstrates that elected officials can and must ensure that military focus remains on readiness, training, and protecting the nation, rather than getting lost in bureaucratic tangents. As we move beyond this hearing, the broader implications are clear. The military will continue to face challenges, both operational and cultural. Success will require the ability to integrate necessary reforms and diversity initiatives without compromising focus on mission-critical tasks. Hawley's questioning illustrates that oversight, clarity, and public accountability are essential tools for maintaining that balance. And as we transition to discussions of future military priorities, one thing stands out. Common sense, courage, and clarity can cut through bureaucracy, redirect focus, and ensure that service members are supported and prepared for the real challenges they face. The pronoun debate, funny to some and alarming to others, ultimately underscores a serious truth. The real test of leadership is knowing what to prioritize, what to question, and what to demand. Josh Hawley's insistence on answers, on clarity, and on tangible results shows how one individual can shine a light on bureaucratic missteps and ensure that the people who risk everything for their country receive the attention, resources, and focus they deserve.